My name is Detective Pierce. Over the years I've walked into crime scenes that defied explanation, followed trails that led into shadows where men should never step, and heard confessions whispered not with words but with blood on walls. Yet, no matter how far I stray into the unnatural, there is always the same beginning, an invitation. A request for help, delivered politely, almost mundanely. Evil rarely announces itself with grandeur. It arrives folded in envelopes, sealed in signatures. This time, the request came from the director of the Metropolitan Antiquities Museum, a place I knew well enough by reputation but had little reason to visit. The letter was neat, its words careful, though their precision only made the undercurrent more desperate. Detective Pierce. We are in dire need of your expertise. A series of incidents, unexplainable, disruptive, and increasingly dangerous, have taken place within the museum after hours. Artifacts have been disturbed without evidence of entry. Guards refuse to continue their shifts. 2 have disappeared entirely. The board would prefer this matter remain discreet. Please come as soon as possible. Dr. Elias Grant, Director. I considered declining. A museum after dark, whispers of vanishing guards. It all reeked of the same staged melodrama I'd seen 100 times, a desperate attempt to cover theft or mismanagement with talk of curses. Yet something in the choice of words caught me. Not missing, but disappeared. Not unwilling, but refused. Subtleties that spoke not of negligence but of fear. And so, I boarded the late train into the city. The museum greeted me as a fortress of stone and glass, its facade lit by pale lamps that seemed too weak for the task. Shadows clung to the columns like rot. Inside, Dr. Grant was waiting, a tall man, shoulders bent by burdens beyond his years, his spectacles smudged as though he had not slept for days. His handshake trembled despite his attempt to steady it. "You came," he said, and I caught the relief in his voice. "Thank God you came." We spoke briefly in his office. The details were sparse, not for lack of effort but because he himself could not explain them. Displays rearranged themselves overnight. Protective cases cracked without force. Guards reported hearing voices in empty wings, languages they did not know, yet somehow understood. One man claimed he saw figures moving behind the glass of sealed exhibits, shapes that matched no human outline. 2 nights ago, 2 guards vanished entirely. Their lanterns were found burning on the floor. Their uniforms lay folded nearby, as though shed deliberately. No trace of the men themselves. I asked about the artifacts most recently acquired. Grant hesitated, then slid a file across the desk. Inside were photographs of a shipment from an excavation in the Middle East, fragments of stone reliefs, pottery, and a sealed wooden crate. The crate had not yet been opened. "It arrived a month ago," he said. "The disturbances began 2 weeks later." I asked where the crate was kept. He said in the East Wing storage hall, locked and unmarked. The key rested in a drawer beside him. He offered it to me with a hand that shook. That night, I began my inspection. The museum after dark was not as I remembered it from school trips and pamphlets. Without the chatter of visitors and the hum of lights, the silence was immense, pressing against the ear like deep water. The marble floors carried my steps with unnatural clarity, every echo chasing itself into unseen corridors. The exhibits loomed in the lantern glow, statues of forgotten kings, relics of wars long since buried, painted eyes that followed with too much intent. I began with the east wing. The key fit the lock with difficulty, as though the door had swollen against its frame. Inside, the storage hall was colder than the rest of the building. My breath misted before me, though no draft touched my skin. The rows of crates stretched long and uneven, their shadows forming broken teeth in the lantern light. It did not take long to find the new arrival. The wood of the crate was dark, not with age but with something deeper, soaked, almost, as though it had been dragged from water. Symbols had been carved into the surface, their lines jagged, unfinished. At first glance, I thought them meaningless scratches, but the longer I looked, the more the shapes formed coherence. They were not letters of any alphabet I knew, but they wanted to be read. I reached out to brush away the dust. The instant my fingers touched the wood, the lantern sputtered. The flame guttered and bent backward, as though recoiling. And then the sound began. Not from the crate, but from the room itself. A low resonance, like the groan of earth shifting beneath stone. My first thought was of pipes, foundations settling, but it carried a rhythm. A cadence too deliberate for chance. I pulled my hand away. The sound ceased. For a long while I stood in the silence, the lantern trembling faintly in my grasp. Finally, I circled the crate. Its lid was sealed with iron nails, though a seam at one corner had split just enough to reveal darkness within. Not cloth. Not straw. Just dark. I crouched to examine it closer. That was when I noticed the footprints. Not shoeprints, bare. The dust around the crate bore the impressions of toes and heels, pressed deep as though from weight far greater than a man's. And they did not lead toward the crate, but away from it. Away, and into the rows of other storage boxes, where they dissolved into shadow. I followed them as far as I could, until they simply ended. No smudge. No fade. One step was there, the next gone. I returned to the crate. Something had changed. The seam at the corner was wider. Only by an inch, no more. But enough. Enough for me to see that the darkness inside was not empty. It moved. A shifting, slow, coiling motion, like smoke pressed against glass. The lantern flared violently. The glass cracked. I stumbled back, raising a hand to shield my face. When the light steadied again, the seam was closed. No sign of movement within. And yet the footprints remained. That was when I heard the whisper. From directly behind me. "Detective." I turned. The hall was empty. The whisper came again, softer now, retreating into the maze of crates. I did not follow. Not yet. Instead, I returned to Dr. Grant, the key clenched tight in my hand. The image of that shifting darkness burned into my sight. "You should not have brought it here," I told him. His face went pale. He asked what I had seen. I did not answer. Not fully. Not yet. Because I knew then, the museum was no longer just a house of history. Something inside it had begun to wake. And I would need to descend far deeper into its halls to understand what price had been paid for disturbing its sleep. Dr. Grant offered to assign guards to accompany me through the night, but I declined. Crowds do not make danger smaller. They only create more victims. He didn't press the matter, though I saw relief in his eyes when I spared him from joining me. He wanted the burden gone, lifted from his hands and placed into mine. That too is common. People crave salvation, but never wish to witness its cost. Still, I was not alone. 2 guards insisted on remaining inside, despite Grant's warnings. Their names were Rivera and Hodge. Rivera was young, his nerves disguised by bravado. Hodge was older, eyes dulled by years of midnight shifts but not without an undercurrent of wariness. They did not want to be there, but neither wished to abandon their posts entirely. I allowed them, on the condition that they follow my lead without question. The museum after midnight is not a place of learning, it is a mausoleum. The galleries stretched endless and cold, their silence sharpened by the knowledge that every figure behind glass had once been touched by living hands, once carried purpose. Without the distraction of visitors, each artifact became a gravestone, its history an echo too faint to identify. We began our circuit in the Hall of Antiquities. The statues there are tall, faceless, their details worn by centuries of wind and war. Yet in the glow of our lanterns, their features seemed sharper than they had any right to be. Rivera swore under his breath when one appeared to be smiling. I told him not to blink too long at any single display. The mind, when afraid, invents movement. At least, I hoped it was invention. We pressed onward. The first disturbance came in the form of sound. A hollow rhythm, distant but unmistakable, the shuffle of steps across marble. Rivera raised his lantern instinctively, casting light over nothing but polished floor. Yet the sound continued, circling us, moving in deliberate arcs. It was not echo. It was pursuit. "Who's there?" Hodge called, his voice steady but strained. The sound ceased, and then resumed closer. I motioned for silence. We stood still, listening. The rhythm shifted, no longer footsteps but something heavier, dragged across stone. A weight far greater than any human stride. We followed it toward the Egyptian wing. The entrance there is flanked by towering columns carved with hieroglyphs, their meanings lost to all but a few scholars. Tonight the carvings seemed freshly etched, their lines deep, their shadows long. As we passed between them, the air grew heavy, charged like the moments before a storm. Inside, the exhibit stirred. I do not mean they moved. At least, not visibly. But their presence shifted, as though the glass cases no longer separated us from them. A row of painted sarcophagi loomed at our right, and I knew, that the figures painted on their lids were watching. Their eyes, once dull pigment, glimmered faintly in the lantern light. Rivera muttered a prayer. "Quiet," I told him. At the far end of the wing, something awaited us. A figure stood beneath the central arch, half seen in the shadows. It did not move as we approached, did not flee. The closer we came, the clearer its outline became, tall, shrouded in cloth, its arms long and stiff at its sides. For an instant, I thought it was part of the exhibit, a mummy misplaced from its case. Then it turned its head. The motion was slow, grinding, as though its neck had not been built to bend. And when its face caught the lantern glow, I saw not linen wrappings but a smooth surface, featureless save for the indentations of where features should have been. Rivera's lantern slipped from his grip and shattered. Darkness surged, swallowing half the wing. "Back!" I ordered. My voice carried calm, though my pulse thundered in my throat. "Step back. Do not run." The figure did not advance, but the shadows behind it did. They swelled upward, spilling across the walls like ink dropped into water. Shapes formed within them, arms that stretched too far, fingers that sought the edges of the glass cases. One sarcophagus rattled, the sound sharp as bones against wood. Hodge cursed under his breath. Rivera stumbled into me, whispering frantically, "It's coming, it's coming." "No," I said. "It's waiting." And it was true. The figure stood utterly still, yet the air around us vibrated with expectation, like prey caught in the gaze of a predator too patient to pounce. The waiting was worse than the attack. I raised my lantern higher. The light flickered but held. The figure's form wavered, its outline bending as though made of smoke. For a heartbeat, its surface rippled, revealing something beneath. Not flesh. Not bone. A darkness deeper than shadow, a void that hungered. Then the sound came again. Not footsteps. Not dragging. A whisper. But this time it was not in English. The words slid through the air in a tongue I had never heard, yet their meaning pressed into my mind uninvited. Return. That was all. A single command. The glass cases trembled. The artifacts inside shifted, some toppling against their restraints. A clay jar shattered, spilling dust across the floor. Rivera gasped as the fragments writhed, curling like insects in the lantern light. Enough, I muttered. I took a step forward. The figure tilted its head, as though curious. This is not your ground, I told it. Whatever brought you here, it ends tonight. My words were swallowed by silence. Then, slowly, the figure retreated. It did not turn, it withdrew, dissolving into the archway as though it had never stood there at all. The shadows thinned, draining back into the corners of the wing. The cases stilled. But not everything was as before. Where the figure had stood, a mark now lingered on the marble floor, a perfect circle, blackened as if seared by flame. And within that circle, the dust stirred, forming letters. Not English. Not Latin. But when I looked, I understood them all the same. The hollow wakes. I stared until the letters faded, until only blank stone remained. Rivera refused to move. Hodge gripped his lantern so tightly I thought the glass would crack. This place isn't right, Hodge muttered. I've seen bad omens, but nothing like this. We need to leave. I shook my head. If we leave now, it follows. It will not stay bound here. Better to face it while the walls still hold. Neither argued further, though their silence spoke enough. We continued through the galleries. The air never lost its weight, nor the sense of eyes upon us. The statues watched. The paintings shifted when not directly seen. Once, I could have sworn a marble bust whispered my name as I passed. At last, we returned to the east wing, to the crate. It had changed again. The nails that sealed it had bent outward, as though forced from within. The seam was wide enough now to fit a hand through, and from within spilled a low, constant murmur, the sound of countless voices speaking at once, overlapping, rising and falling in waves. Rivera pressed his hands to his ears. I can't. Hold, I said. I approached the crate. The voices surged as I neared, distinct words straining against comprehension. I caught fragments, pleas, commands, curses. Some begged for release. Others threatened. All were spoken in that same alien tongue, yet all cut straight into meaning. I bent low, the lantern casting light into the seam. For an instant I saw. Not objects, not artifacts. Faces. Countless, pressed together in the dark, their mouths open in unison. Not flesh and blood, but impressions, like carvings on stone that had learned to breathe. Their eyes opened as one, staring directly into mine. The lantern flared. The wood of the crate groaned. The voices screamed. I stumbled back, shielding my ears. The guards did the same, their cries lost in the cacophony. The sound rose higher, cracking the glass of nearby cases. Dust poured from the ceiling. Then silence. Utter, absolute silence. When I looked again, the crate was as before. Sealed. Still. Silent. Only one thing remained changed. The footprints around the crate were fresh again. But this time, they were not leaving. They were approaching. From every direction. As though the figures from the halls had returned. As though they had been standing there with us the entire time. The footprints. That detail lodged in my mind like a thorn. Dozens of impressions in the dust, circling the crate, pressing inward as though a crowd had gathered. Rivera shone his lantern low, tracing the marks. His hand trembled, making the light quiver across the floor. They're fresh, he whispered. Too fresh. Like someone's still here. No, I corrected. Not someone. Not people. Hodge swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the shadows stretching from the cases. You think it's them? The things we saw? I did not answer. To confirm his suspicion would break the fragile hold they had on their fear. To deny it would be a lie too obvious. silence was safer. Instead, I studied the patterns. The footprints overlapped, chaotic yet deliberate, all converging upon the crate. Some appeared human. Others did not. Elongated toes, twisted arches, prints too wide or too narrow, all etched into the thin veil of dust. They gathered as if in worship or hunger. "Step away," I ordered. The guards obeyed, retreating with visible relief. I crouched low, examining the seam of the crate once more. No sound came now, no whisper, no cry. Only the faint scent of earth, stale and dry, like soil long buried. But I knew it was not over. When I rose, the air shifted. It was subtle at first, a change in weight, a quiet in the silence. Then the lantern flame stretched sideways, drawn toward the corridor leading deeper into the museum. Rivera gasped. "The air's moving. But there's no vent. No draft." The corridor yawned before us, lined with marble busts of forgotten rulers. Their stone eyes gleamed faintly, reflecting our trembling light. I felt the pull as well, not of air, but of will. The building itself was guiding us. I had walked many corridors in my life. Prisons, asylums, tunnels carved into the earth. But none felt like this. This was not architecture. This was anatomy. The hall narrowed as we advanced, though no seam marked the shift. The walls inched closer, the busts leaning subtly inward. Hodge muttered that the statues weren't in this order earlier, that one with the broken nose had been near the entrance, not the middle. I believed him. The museum was rearranging itself. Rivera stumbled, catching himself on a pedestal. The bust atop it shuddered, its stone lips parting just enough for dust to spill. "Keep moving," I said. We emerged into the Hall of Tapestries, a chamber I remembered as wide and ornate, its walls draped with woven histories of ancient dynasties. Tonight, it was transformed. The tapestries shifted in the lantern glow, their figures writhing as though embroidered hands now reached for freedom. One scene depicted a banquet. The woven guests now turned their heads to watch us, stitched eyes gleaming red with reflected light. Another showed a battlefield, the corpses slowly twitching, their threads unraveling to form grasping fingers. Rivera pressed close to me, his breath shallow. "This isn't possible. These things, they're just cloth. Just cloth. Then don't stare long enough to let them prove otherwise." A path had been cleared through the chamber, the central carpet rolled back to reveal black marble beneath. And upon that marble, fresh footprints again, gleaming as though pressed into tar. They trailed forward, deeper still. We followed. The path ended in a gallery I had not seen on any floor plan. A vaulted chamber, circular, its walls lined with cases that stretched higher than the lantern could reach. Inside each case hung a mask. Hundreds of them, each carved from different cultures, eras, and rituals. Painted faces, gilded visages, crude wooden grimaces, all staring outward in eternal silence. The air here was colder. Rivera's lantern guttered, nearly extinguishing before flaring back. And then one mask moved. Its jaw parted, wood creaking like old bone. A rasp issued forth, soft and brittle. "Pierce." Rivera dropped his lantern with a cry, plunging half the chamber into shadow. Hodge caught his arm before he bolted, forcing him still. I stepped forward. "Speak." The mask's painted eyes rolled, black pits glistening. "You trespass." "I investigate," I corrected. "And I see more than you wish." The surrounding masks stirred, hundreds shifting in unison. Jaws creaked, teeth clicked, voices whispered in a chorus that filled the chamber. "Leave, leave, leave!" The sound layered, growing louder, until it no longer resembled words but a rising wind, a howl of rage and grief. Rivera pressed his hands to his ears. Hodge bared his teeth, refusing to cower. And still I listened. Within the cacophony, a pattern emerged. Not random, not chaotic. A message buried beneath the fury. The hollow wakes. The same words etched upon the marble in the Egyptian wing. The same promise or threat. But here there was more. Another phrase, repeated by a dozen voices in staggered rhythm, circling my name like vultures. The vessel breaks. The hollow feeds. I did not know then what vessel they spoke of, but the certainty in their tone chilled me more than ignorance itself. The mask shuddered, their voices rising until the glass of the cases cracked. Shards rained upon the floor, yet none cut my skin. The fragments dissolved into ash before they touched me. Enough, I said, though my voice was nearly lost in the storm. If you would warn me, then warn me. If you would strike, then strike. But I will not be moved by noise. At that, silence. Sudden. Crushing. The masks froze. Their eyes dulled, their jaws sealed. Only one remained animate, the first. Its painted surface rippled like liquid, distorting its features until what remained was no mask at all but a face. My face. It smiled. And then it shattered. The blast of glass and sound threw Rivera to the floor. Hodge dragged him back, cursing. I shielded my eyes until the debris settled. When I looked again, the chamber was empty. The cases stood whole, each mask lifeless, as though nothing had stirred. But in the center of the floor, where the broken mask had hung, lay an object. Small. Black. A stone. Perfectly smooth, carved into a hollow circle. I bent to retrieve it. The moment my fingers touched its surface, a vision consumed me. Darkness. Endless, absolute. Figures shifting in the void, either human nor beast. A hunger vast enough to swallow light, pressing against unseen walls. And within it, voices chanting, not in rage, not in warning, but in joy. The vessel breaks. The hollow feeds. I gasped, tearing my hand away. The stone fell to the marble with a sharp crack. When I looked, it was gone. Rivera scrambled to his feet, shaking. We need to get out. Now. Whatever this is, it's not meant for us. Hodge met my gaze, silent but expectant. He would not say the words, but I saw the same plea in his eyes. I stood, my breath steadying. No. If this wakes, the world beyond these walls suffers. Better we risk ourselves than abandon the rest. Rivera shook his head violently. You're mad. We're already dead if we stay. Perhaps, I said. But madness is a small price against what waits. The air shifted again, drawing us toward yet another corridor. The museum was not finished. Its hunger guided us, dragging us deeper. And I, against reason, against fear, followed. For I had begun to understand. The museum was no longer a building. It was a mouth. And it was beginning to open. The corridor pressed us forward, long and low, lit only by the lantern Rivera had nearly dropped for good. Its flame shrank with every step, as though afraid. The air grew colder, thick with a scent like damp earth and burnt paper. This isn't on the blueprints, Rivera muttered, his knuckles white around the lantern handle. We're underground. Below the foundations. Not underground, I said. Inside. Hodge glanced at me sharply. Inside what? I did not answer. Because to speak it then would have been to acknowledge what gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. That the museum itself had become more than structure, that it grew inward like a lung, an organ, a body that inhaled us deeper with every step. The corridor ended in a door of iron. Not wood, not stone. Iron, rusted, scarred, etched with symbols worn smooth by centuries of hands or claws. Rivera raised the lantern, its light pooling across a lock that was not mechanical but bone. A knucklebone, fused into the iron, sockets hollow, teeth carved into its surface like runes. I touched it. The bone was warm. The door opened without a sound. Beyond lay the archives. Not shelves, not catalogs, but pits. The floor dropped away into a cavern vast enough to swallow the lantern's light. Tier upon tier of steps descended, each lined not with books but with coffins. Coffins stacked like volumes in a library, their lids marked with names, languages, and glyphs I did not recognize. Some lids were glass, revealing withered corpses within, their mouths stitched shut, their hands pressed against the surface as though in prayer. Rivera gagged. This is a tomb." "No," I said softly. "This is memory." For I understood now. The museum was not built to preserve art, nor relics, nor history. It was built to preserve hunger. To catalog what the hollow had already consumed. We descended. Our footsteps echoed like whispers, swallowed quickly by the weight of the coffins around us. The deeper we went, the louder the sound of scratching became. At first faint, like nails against wood. Then sharper, more insistent. Until it surrounded us. Rivera stopped, trembling. "They're moving." He was right. The coffins shifted in their niches. Fingers clawed against glass lids, cracking them. Nails scraped splinters from wood. Some hands reached out fully, desiccated flesh tearing as the dead tried to escape their bindings. "They're not escaping," I said. "They're reaching." "For what?" Hodge asked. "For us." We quickened our pace, though every step echoed like an invitation. At the bottom tier stood a dais, circular, carved from the same black marble as the floors above. Upon it rested a single coffin larger than the rest, bound not by rope or metal but by chains forged directly into the stone. Its lid was stone as well, etched with the same words I had already read twice. "The hollow wakes." The lid shuddered as we approached. I raised my hand, signaling the guards to hold. Rivera obeyed, trembling. Hodge drew his pistol, though we both knew bullets meant nothing here. The coffin groaned. A fissure split the lid, a thin crack glowing with faint, pale light. Not fire. Not life. But emptiness. Light that did not illuminate, only erased. From within, a whisper. "Pierce." The guards flinched. I stood closer. "What are you?" The whisper swelled into a chorus. Hundreds of voices, layered, neither male nor female, either human nor beast. "We are the hollow. We are the silence between breaths. We are the mouth that waits for the vessel." My hand curled unconsciously toward the pocket where I had placed the black stone from the mask hall. It burned against my coat, alive. "What vessel?" I demanded. The fissure widened. Light spilled out, pale and cold, crawling across the floor like frost. Rivera cried out as it touched his boot, yanking his leg back. Where the light brushed leather, it did not scorch but thinned, fading it, as though the material itself were being erased. "The vessel is broken," the voices intoned. "The hollow feeds." Hodge gritted his teeth. "Pierce, we should seal this. Now. Before it comes out." But I knew we could not. The chains did not rattle. They absorbed the strain, humming faintly, holding the coffin closed. Whatever was inside could not yet rise. But it would. And when it did, the museum itself would no longer be a cage but a throat. The fissure widened again, spilling more of that pale frost. Rivera raised the lantern, desperate. Its flame flared once, then died. Darkness swallowed us. Yet the coffin glowed, its fissure now a wound gaping across the lid. And through it, fingers emerged. Not bone. Not flesh. But shadow made solid, digits of absence that gripped the edge of the stone and pulled. The lid shifted. The sound was unbearable, a grinding that seemed to scrape against the inside of my skull. Rivera screamed. Hodge fired his pistol, the report deafening in the cavern. Bullets tore into shadow, vanishing without resistance. The lid lifted another inch. A breath exhaled. Cold. Endless. I staggered back, clutching the stone in my pocket. It seared against my skin, forcing me to pull it free. The black circle gleamed, its surface rippling as though it contained the same void. The shadow fingers recoiled. The voices howled. The vessel! The vessel! The hollow weights! The stone pulsed in my hand. And I understood. This was no relic. It was a seal. A fragment of whatever binding kept the hollow chained. I pressed it against the coffin. The fissure convulsed, the light sputtering. The shadow fingers writhed, trying to resist. But the stone's pulse grew stronger, matching the rhythm of my heartbeat. The chains tightened, glowing faintly red as though reignited by the seal. The voices screamed, rising into a cacophony that rattled the coffins all around us. Lids burst, corpses flailed, glass shattered. But the central coffin groaned shut, the fissure sealing until only silence remained. The stone crumbled in my hand. Dust. Gone. Silence. Only the echo of our breaths, ragged and trembling. Rivera collapsed to his knees, sobbing. Hodge stood rigid, pistol still raised, though his hand shook. I lowered mine, staring at the coffin. The chains no longer glowed, but they held. For now. It isn't over, I said. Hodge looked at me, sweat streaking his brow. What in God's name was that? Not God, I replied. Something older. Something that sleeps and waits. And if it wakes? Rivera croaked. I did not answer. Because I knew the truth. It would wake again. And when it did, there might be no stone, no seal, no chain strong enough to bind it. We climbed in silence, our boots crunching shards of glass from the shattered coffins. Rivera carried the lantern, though its flame was weak, sputtering, reluctant. I could not fault it. Even fire seemed afraid here. Behind us the chained coffin lay still, but I did not trust stillness. It felt less like defeat than patience. The stairwell stretched upward endlessly. We climbed for minutes, then for what felt like hours, but the top never grew nearer. Rivera stopped first, his chest heaving. This isn't possible. We've been climbing the same steps. Look, the same crack on the wall, the same coffin with the missing lid. He was right. We were circling, trapped in a loop. Hodge slammed his palm against the wall. God damn it! We'll never get out this way. Calm yourself, I said, though my own voice trembled. This place is no longer stone and mortar. It is thought. Memory. We cannot leave by ordinary means. Then how? Rivera's eyes darted toward the coffins around us. Several had shifted again, corpses pressing their faces to the glass, teeth bared in grotesque smiles. I closed my eyes, recalling the stone that had crumbled in my palm. It had been a seal, yes, but also a key. Perhaps its destruction had not freed us, but trapped us further. We need another way, I murmured. The coffins groaned. One shattered outright, the corpse within lurching forward, jaw unhinging in a silent scream. Its body collapsed on the steps, brittle as parchment, yet still it dragged itself toward us. Hodge fired twice. The skull burst, but the body writhed still, a puppet dancing on unseen strings. Rivera kicked it away, the brittle limbs snapping as it tumbled into the dark. Then the lantern went out. We froze in blackness. Only breath, pounding hearts, and the faint rustle of movement all around us. Coffins creaked open. Glass cracked. Nails scraped stone. Dozens. Hundreds. I struck a match, the flare a fragile island of light. In its glow, the stairwell was crowded with figures pulling themselves free of their shelves, crawling, staggering, their mouths open wide though no sound escaped. Silent screams, silent laughter, silent hunger. Rivera whimpered. "They're coming." "Not toward us," I whispered. He frowned. "What do you?" Then we saw. The corpses did not advance. They turned their heads upward, toward the unseen roof. Every neck craned, every withered eye fixed on something above. They pressed their hands against the walls, the steps, the ceiling, as if in prayer. And then they began to climb. Not the stairs, but the walls themselves, clinging to stone like insects. Dozens scuttled past us, ascending into the dark, their limbs contorting unnaturally. Hodge swore. "What the hell?" "Quiet." We held our breath as the horde passed, endless, their dry skin rasping against the walls, their silent devotion filling the stairwell. They vanished above, leaving only the faint echo of movement. When silence returned, I let the match burn to my fingers before extinguishing it. "Why didn't they attack?" Rivera whispered. "Because we are not their quarry," I said. "Not yet." The thought chilled me more than any assault. If they were summoned elsewhere, then something far worse awaited above. We climbed again, slower this time, watching every coffin. But the steps no longer looped. After only a dozen turns, a faint light appeared above, warm, golden, impossible. The museum's main hall. We emerged at last into the Hall of Antiquities. But it was not as we had left it. The skylight above was shattered, moonlight pouring in like a blade. The exhibits were overturned, glass cases shattered, artifacts scattered across the marble. And everywhere, the pale frost from the coffin's fissure crept along the floor, erasing color, sound, warmth. Rivera lifted the lantern again, though no flame would catch. "What happened here?" Hodge pointed toward the central rotunda. There, upon the polished floor, words had been carved deep into the stone, gouged by something not human. "The hollow rises." A sound echoed from the far end of the hall. Footsteps. We raised our weapons instinctively. But what entered was no corpse. A man. Or something that had once been a man. He wore a curator's uniform, though torn and stained. His eyes were gone, sockets hollow, yet he walked without faltering. In his hands he carried a ledger, its pages fluttering though no wind stirred. He stopped before us, lifted his face, and spoke in a voice both his own and not his own. "The archives are open. The names awaken. The vessel will be chosen." I stepped forward cautiously. "Who are you?" "The hollow is not who. The hollow is what remains when names are devoured." His body shuddered. Fingers tore at his chest until skin split, ribs cracked, and from within spilled not blood but pages. Pages covered in names, written in ink that shimmered like oil. The pages fluttered upward, scattering, filling the air like a storm of wings. Rivera screamed. Hodge fired again, bullets tearing through the man's frame. But there was nothing to kill. His body collapsed, scattering into ash and parchment, the ledger clattering to the ground. I picked it up. Its cover bore the same words, "The Hollow Wakes." Inside, names filled every page. Some crossed out. Some smudged. But 3 burned bright as though freshly written. Pierce. Hodge. Rivera. The ink bled as I stared, spreading like veins across the paper. My hand trembled. "They know us," I whispered. Rivera backed away, shaking his head. No, I won't be part of this. I didn't sign up for this madness." The hollow doesn't ask, I said. The ground trembled. Frost spread faster across the marble, racing toward us. From the broken skylight above, pale light poured, coalescing into shapes, shadow fingers, reaching downward like roots. We ran. Through corridors twisted, exhibits shattered, doors that led only to walls. The museum was no longer itself. It had become a labyrinth of memory, every turn echoing with whispers, every hallway shifting when unseen. Hodge fired at shadows. Rivera sobbed. And I held the ledger tight, knowing it was both curse and map. Because every step I took, new words appeared upon its pages, guiding us deeper. Not out. Never out. But towards something waiting at the heart of the hollow. The ledger burned cold in my hands, pages writhing with names as though alive. Each letter pulsed with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, and I felt it, not reading, but knowing, every pulse was a summons. The hollow had marked us. It had chosen. Pierce, Rivera whimpered. His voice was a broken reed. I can't. Keep moving, I said, though my chest tightened. Every step felt like wading through thick water, every shadow reaching for me, brushing against my coat as if to test my flesh. The hall stretched before us, endless yet constricted, the broken skylight above weaving silver and frost across the floor. Shapes moved in the corners of my eyes, figures tall and thin, faceless, climbing walls, slipping between columns. Not dead. Not alive. Somewhere beyond. Hungry. Watching. Hodge's pistol clicked. Empty. He cursed under his breath, then looked at me. Pierce, they're not human. What the hell are they? They are what remains, I said. The echoes, the hollowed. They are the hunger of memory made flesh. Ahead, the marble cracked. A fissure ran from the rotunda to the far wall, glowing faintly, the same pale frost from the coffin creeping outward like roots. Through the crack, a light moved, cold, infinite. The shadows pulsed toward it, flowing, pooling like ink. I forced Rivera forward. The ledger, it will guide us. Trust it. He stumbled, tripping over a broken pedestal, and the ledger fluttered from my hands. Pages spun in the air, whispering names. I caught one Hodge. My stomach clenched. His own name, alive, searching for him. He looked at me, terror finally breaking his mask of courage. They're calling me, he said, voice hollow. I can't fight it. Then follow me, I barked. Or it will claim you entirely. We pressed forward, halls folding in on themselves. The shadows thickened, forming shapes, hands, faces, torsos, but never complete, always shifting, always hungry. The temperature dropped until every breath left a frost. Ahead, a doorway appeared where none should have been, a simple arch leading to blackness. Frost licked the edges of the arch like fingers. The ledger pulsed, pulling me closer. I understood instinctively. The hollow's heart lay beyond. Rivera froze. It's calling us. I can hear it in my head. Yes, I said softly. And it wants something. It wants a vessel. If we do not confront it, it will take one of us, maybe all. The hallway behind us groaned. Coffins rose, twisting and turning, reaching out. A hand, skeletal and long-fingered, burst from the floor beside Rivera, curling around his ankle. He screamed, jerking free, but the frost left a burn on his skin. I drew a deep breath. The ledger pulsed again, hotter, faster. Its rhythm was mine. I realized, it was not just a guide. It was a key. The doorway beckoned. The whispers of the hollow swirled around us, rising into a chorus of hunger and accusation. The vessel awakens. The vessel awakens. The hollow feeds. I stepped through. The air inside was thick with weight, not sound, not light. Every pulse of my heart resonated across the chamber, and the darkness responded. Shapes coiled, rising from the black floor. Faces pressed into the void, my face, Rivera's, Hodges, all staring, silent, unblinking. I knew then, the hollow was not a place. It was an entity. A predator. A memory. And it had waited for us long before we ever entered. One step further, and the shadows bent toward me. The frost surged like a wave, clawing at my coat, biting my hands, seeking the stone that had been crushed, seeking the vessel it had promised. I swallowed fear. The ledger in my hand thrummed with heat. It pulsed. It demanded action. And I understood, to survive, one choice alone remained. Confront it, or be consumed entirely. I lifted my lantern high. The flame flared, weak, trembling, but it held. The shadows recoiled slightly, hissing as if tasting light for the first time in centuries. Then the whisper. Pierce. Closer this time. Behind my ears, inside my skull. I turned. Nothing. The hollow waited. And I stepped forward, into the darkness it had made mine. The darkness closed in like a tide. Every step reverberated against my bones, the ledger quivering in my grasp. Names whispered in the void, curling around my mind. Rivera's breathing was ragged behind me, Hodge silent, frozen in the chill. Then the ground shifted. Marble became flesh, columns twisted into bone. The walls breathed. The hollow was alive. Not lurking. Not waiting. It moved, and the movement was the rhythm of dread itself. Pierce. Rivera's voice was trembling. I can't feel my legs. I can't. I grabbed his arm, shaking him. You can. You have to. The ledger, follow it. The pages flared, revealing a path. Not straight. Not simple. But through the shifting chaos, a doorway formed, arched in frost and shadow, darker than black, yet calling, pulling. The names on the ledger glowed brighter with every step toward it. My own name burned like a brand. Hodge muttered under his breath. I don't like this. None of this is real. It's as real as fear, I said. And if we stop, it will consume us. We stepped through the threshold. Inside, the chamber was impossibly vast. I could not see its edges. Frost hung in pillars like frozen waterfalls. The air hummed with voices, not speaking, but demanding. Shapes floated just beyond comprehension, fragments of bodies, fragments of faces, memories twisted into forms of hunger. And at the center, the vessel. It was a coffin, yes, but not ordinary. Black stone, cracked and fissured, a pale light leaking from within. The frost around it curled upward, like smoke or tentacles. Whispering names. Every name on the ledger, glowing, clawing. And at the very top, a hollow shadow, its outline humanoid, yet wrong, shifting, like smoke and wind. It wants someone, Rivera stammered. One of us. The shadow extended a hand, or a thing like a hand. Frost snaked toward us, probing, testing. The chamber trembled. Pages lifted from the ledger, spinning around in a cyclone of names, some landing on our shoulders, some burning the air with a whisper of heat. I held the ledger high. Its pulse synced with mine. It seemed to call, choose, resist. And I understood, this was not just survival. This was a test. To confront the hollow, we had to face ourselves. To claim the vessel, or avoid it, we needed to claim the truth within. The shadow's voice rose, soft, omnipresent. The hollow awakens. The vessel is ready. Choose, Rivera screamed. Hodge fired blindly. bullets dissolved in frost. I felt my name burn on the ledger again. The pulse of it, mine and mine alone, was a drum in the frozen chamber. I stepped closer to the coffin. Each step a defiance. Each pulse a heartbeat against the void. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if recognizing me. I spoke aloud, though my voice was trembling. I am here. I will not be taken. I will not become nothing. The shadow shivered. Frost trembled. Pages swirled faster. Names glowed brighter. And then, a sound, low, guttural, like stone cracking, echoed through the chamber. The hollow was awakening fully, and it had noticed me. The frost thickened with every heartbeat, spreading across the chamber like a tide of glass and bone. I could hear Rivera's panicked breathing, sharp and ragged, each exhale crystallizing in the air. Hodge was silent, crouched with his back against a column that was somehow both marble and muscle, eyes darting, scanning, praying. The shadow hovered above the coffin, pulsing like a heartbeat larger than any human. Its edges wavered, as if reality itself could not contain it. And yet it was patient, watching, waiting. Pages from the ledger spun around us in a cyclone of names, striking the walls and floor, sticking briefly, then falling away, leaving smudged ink that whispered in tongues we could not understand. I clenched the ledger tightly, its weight pressing against my chest, a reminder that whatever this hollow was, it was not bound by human laws. Pierce, Rivera whispered, voice trembling. We can't fight it. Look at it. We're nothing. I shook my head. We're not nothing. Not yet. The ledger, it shows us the way. It guides us. It's our choice. Hodge growled. Choice? Look at this place. Look at those things. I've seen corpses climb walls, Pierce. What the hell makes you think this thing cares about our choice? I didn't answer. There was no point. The shadow stirred, and the frost limbs snaked downward, latching onto the floor and walls. The coffin's pale glow expanded, illuminating the chamber, revealing grotesque shapes in the periphery, half-formed figures, writhing, reaching, all silent yet full of expectation. The ledger burned in my hands. My own name pulsed brighter than the others. And then I saw it, a figure, one of the previously lifeless corpses, now standing at the edge of the frost tide. Its eyes glowed faintly. The ink of my name had marked it, like a beacon. Rivera screamed. It's coming for me! But the figure didn't move toward us. It moved toward the coffin, drawn by the same pull, drawn by the hollow itself. I realized, with a sickening clarity, that the hollow was not hunting blindly. It was choosing. And its choice could be anyone, even us. Pierce! Hodge shouted. We do something now, or it takes one of us. I opened the ledger. The pages flipped violently, as if alive. Names bled off the paper, hovering in midair. 3 names burned brightest, mine, Rivera's, Hodge's. The shadow's voice returned, layered, omnipresent. Choose, or be chosen. The vessel awaits. I took a deep breath. The chamber seemed to pulse with it, every shadow, every frost tentacle, every floating fragment of memory vibrating in rhythm with the command. I stepped closer to the coffin. The air grew thick, and my vision blurred with frost. Rivera grabbed my arm. No! Don't! It's a trap! I shook him off. If we run, it will follow. If we hesitate, it will claim one of us. We face it. Together. The shadow recoiled slightly at my words, as if recognition passed through it. Frost limbs writhed, curling toward me, brushing my shoulders, tugging at my clothes. A whisper of voices filled my mind, fragments of every name the hollow had consumed. Pierce. Pierce. I gasped and swung the ledger in front of me. The pages flared, a blinding light that pushed back the frost and shadow. Names spun faster, then slowed, forming a vortex above the coffin. Hodge fired into the air, bullets fizzing like sparks against invisible steel. Rivera screamed, throwing himself to the side as fragments of frost splintered around him. And then silence. The shadow lingered, coalescing, but it did not advance. Its head tilted, as if studying us, weighing us. The coffin pulsed, and a cold, hollow wind swept through the chamber, carrying the echo of countless voices. I realized the ledger was not merely a map. It was a key. And the hollow, it was waiting for us to decide. Pierce, Rivera whispered, voice trembling. What do we do? I looked at the ledger. Names scrolled endlessly, the three of ours burning like lanterns in a storm. And I understood. The hollow didn't just want us to survive. It wanted us to claim the vessel, or die trying. Hodge spat blood, crouching low. I'm not going first. You two deal with your ghost. I shook my head. We do this together, or not at all. The hollow doesn't split us. It takes what we fear most, our doubt, our fear, our hesitation. And we cannot give it that. The shadow pulsed again. The coffin's fissures widened. Frost's fingers reached higher, searching. I stepped closer, holding the ledger before me like a shield, and the names began to rise, swirling in the air, forming a staircase of light leading directly into the hollow of the coffin. Rivera's eyes widened. That's impossible. I didn't answer. I stepped forward. One step. Then another. Each step echoed like a drumbeat through the chamber, shaking frost and bone alike. The hollow recoiled, curling its tendrils away from the light. Hodge hissed. You're insane! I'm alive, I whispered. And this is the only way. The ledger's light flared, pages spinning like wings. Frost receded from the coffin, curling into the air like smoke. The shadow shrieked, not with sound, but with a void that pressed against my chest, trying to steal the light from my mind. And then, for the first time, the hollow paused. I knew, in that instant, that the confrontation had begun. The vessel was real. And the choice, whether to claim it, destroy it, or let it claim one of us, would decide everything. The staircase of light trembled beneath my feet, each step a vibration in my bones, as if the ledger itself were alive and guiding me towards something beyond comprehension. Rivera stumbled behind me, his face pale, sweat and frost mingling into rivulets that ran down his cheeks. Hodge stayed at the base, muttering curses under his breath, but even he could see the impossibility above, the hollowed coffin suspended in its own gravity, glowing like a sun of cold fire. The shadow recoiled, its edges writhing, freezing and unfreezing in the air. Then it moved. Not toward us, but along the perimeter, circling, watching, learning. Every tendril of frosted command it became sharper, longer, reaching as if to pierce the chamber itself. Rivera whimpered. It's watching us. It knows. Yes, I whispered, my fingers tight around the ledger. It knows our fear, our hesitation, and it wants to exploit it. The first strike came without warning. A frost limb lashed out from the shadow's perimeter, slamming into the wall behind Hodge. Marble splintered, dust and shards flying. Hodge dove sideways, firing blindly into the dark, bullets hissing against the ice like sparks on steel. Move! I shouted. Up the steps, follow the ledger. Rivera stumbled again, almost tripping on the glowing names that floated like stepping stones before us. I grabbed his arm, yanking him forward as the frost limb whipped past, shredding the marble staircase with unnatural force. Why are we Hodge's scream cut short as another shadow limb lashed out from above, striking him square in the shoulder. Blood sprayed, black against pale frost, and he fell backward, sliding down the steps with a terrified cry. I turned to help, but the ledger's light pulsed violently. Names, all of our names, glowed hotter, brighter, as if demanding I choose without hesitation. And I realized the hollow was testing us. It didn't just want to consume. It wanted to break us, one hesitation at a time. I grabbed Rivera, forcing him up another step. The ledger's pages fluttered, each one striking the frozen air like blades. Whispers swelled, hundreds of voices screaming, laughing, weeping, all blending into a single pulse of dread that beat against my chest. And then, the coffin spoke. Not with words, not with voice, but with intent. It pulled. The light reached toward me, curling around my limbs, tugging me forward, lifting me higher. I stumbled, resisting, but the ledger burned in my hands, each name burning like a talon into my consciousness. Hodge crawled up, grimacing, firing blindly at the frost limbs, but the hollow was everywhere. Shadows coalesced into faces, mouths opening wide in silent screams, then dissolving into smoke before we could look away. Frost swept past my feet, threatening to encase us entirely. Rivera screamed, clutching at the ledger. I can't! I won't! Yes, you can! I yelled, shoving him forward. The ledger chooses, but we decide. Now! The staircase narrowed. The coffin hung closer, suspended in the center of the chamber like a suspended heart, glowing with a frost that burned. The shadow lunged, a storm of tendrils reaching for us, its sheer mass pushing at the edges of reality. I stepped onto the final glowing page, feeling its warmth sear through the cold. The hollow shrieked, and the frost limbs recoiled slightly. Hodge followed, limping but determined. Rivera hesitated, terror etched into his every feature, but I grabbed his hand, forcing him to step forward. The ledger's glow enveloped us. Names flared, spinning into a vortex around the coffin. And in that moment, I understood the truth. We could not simply flee. We could not fight with bullets, with courage alone. The hollow demanded a choice. One of us, or all of us. I looked at the ledger. 3 names burned brightest. Mine. Rivera's. Hodges. The choice was not whether we would be claimed. The choice was how. I took a deep breath, stepping fully onto the glowing surface, feeling the pull of the coffin against my chest, the frost curling around my boots like serpents. Hodge followed, gritting his teeth. Rivera trembled beside me, eyes wide, but he stepped forward, trusting, or fearing, the choice. The hollow recoiled, then surged upward. Frost limbs lashed, names screamed in the air, voices overlapping in a crescendo of madness. But the ledger flared, shielding us, binding the hollow in a vortex of light and ink. And then silence. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The frost froze midair, the shadow curled into itself, and the coffin hung suspended, a glowing beacon in a chamber of shattered marble. We were still alive. But we were not safe. The ledger pulsed once, then settled. The names of the 3 of us glowed steadily, and for the first time, I realized the next step. The hollow had chosen. And now, we had to answer. The chamber pulsed with the heartbeat of the hollow. Frost coiled like serpents around broken columns, and the ledger burned with a cold light that seemed to pierce reality itself. The coffin hung above us, glowing with the same unnatural frost, a suspended heart waiting to be claimed. Rivera trembled, clutching the ledger. I can't do this, he whispered, voice cracking. I don't want to be part of this. You have no choice, I said, though my own voice shook. It's not asking anymore. It's taking. Hodge gritted his teeth, adjusting his stance. Then we fight it, whatever it is. I shook my head. You don't understand. This isn't a fight with bullets, with weapons. This is a fight for ourselves. The hollow doesn't kill, it consumes your essence, your being. You survive only if you make it want you alive, in a way it cannot control. The frost limbs lashed downward, cracking marble, splintering steps. Shadows erupted from every wall, every display, writhing faces screaming in silence. The hollow had sensed hesitation, feeding on fear. I opened the ledger, flipping to the pages where our names glowed brightest. I spoke aloud, each word careful, deliberate, almost a prayer. I am Pierce. I am not yours. I am here. I am aware. The air shifted. The frost recoiled slightly. Hodge and Rivera mirrored my words, their voices trembling but steadying. I am Hodge. I am not yours. I am Rivera. I am here, and I will not yield. The ledger pulsed, pages spinning like a storm. The hollow shrieked, a soundless eruption of fury that rattled the chamber. Frost limbs lashed faster, shadow faces twisted in rage. But the names burned brighter, and we felt the first flicker of control. I realized then what must be done. The hollow was bound to the ledger, to the names. If we surrendered, it would claim us fully. But if we offered it nothing, no fear, no hesitation, no denial, it could not touch us. The coffin descended, frost dripping like blood, its cold glow suffocating. I stepped forward, ledger raised high, our three shadows merging into one light. We are here! We are ourselves! Not yours, not hollow! The hollow screamed. The chamber shook violently. Frost ripped from the marble, sweeping past us in a blizzard of death, but the ledger held, the names glowing hotter than the frost could extinguish. Then came a sound unlike any before, a crack, a tearing, a shattering. The coffin split, shards of frost raining down, scattering into nothingness. Shadow limbs recoiled, faces screaming as they dissolved into whispers, then silence. The hollow writhed, twisting, shrinking, until the last wisp of shadow was absorbed into the ledger itself. We fell to the marble, gasping, frost melting from our hair and skin. The chamber was quiet, still. The light of the ledger dimmed, then settled, glowing softly like a heartbeat of its own. Rivera sank to his knees, trembling. It's gone? Not gone, I said, still gripping the ledger. Contained. Bound. But awake, always awake. Hodge wiped frost from his face, looking around at the shattered hall. We survived. Somehow. But at what cost? I turned the pages of the ledger. The names of the three of us still glowed. Others were crossed out, smudged, or burned away. The hollow had chosen its prey before, and failed. But the ledger remained. A warning. A map. A prison. We left the hall slowly, stepping over broken exhibits, shards of glass, and frost that no longer burned but lingered, silent and patient. The museum's doors loomed ahead, cracked and warped yet open. The night air outside smelled of earth, cold wind, and freedom. Yet as I glanced at the ledger one last time, I knew the truth. The hollow sleeps, bound only by words, by acknowledgement, by names. It waits. And it will awaken again. We walked into the night, the frost behind us retreating slowly, and the museum, alive, patient, hungry, vanished into shadow. But in the ledger, a single page fluttered in the wind, blank and waiting. The hollow chooses again.